Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we at the store have been passionately looking forward to this event, and we are so glad to see all of you here. The first thing I would like to do before we get started is acknowledge that we gather here on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. Let's take a moment tonight to honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, a people who are still here, continuing to bring their heritage in this place to light. Acknowledging that we are guests on native land is just a start, so if you are able, please do consider donating directly to realrentduwamish.org to help support Duwamish outreach and cultural life. I would also like to remind everyone to take this moment to go ahead and silence those old cell phones so they're not chirping like little birds in your pockets.
My mom calls me during Thanksgiving. And she knows I'm on stage. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot.
So unless you're expecting a call from Roxanne's mom, we will also be doing some signings after the event. I will call you up by row, so keep your ears peeled and we will get that sorted at the end of our conversation tonight. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce our wonderful moderator. We're so grateful to have her here from the university this evening. I'm honored to introduce to you Rachel Chapman, Associate Professor of Anthropology and Adjunct Professor of Global Health and Gender, Women and Sexuality Studies at the University of Washington. Rachel takes an anti-racist and racial justice approach to anthropology and has focused her research on topics including the impacts of systemic racism in health institutions on communities of color and survivance and liberation practices in African and African diaspora communities. Her core projects include Black women's reproductive care seeking, the impact of gender violence on health, HIV treatment during pregnancy, perinatal caregiving in refugee and immigrant communities, teen peacemaking and restorative justice in urban communities, and her current work is with pregnant folks in Seattle addressing reproductive health equity right here in our town. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me in the back if I don't pick this up? Hello? Yes? All right, thumbs up. Thank you to the University of Washington bookstore for inviting me. As a faculty member, these are the things that you every once in a while get to do that make the whole thing worth it. I've had two things come into my box where it's like somewhere in my youth or childhood, I must have done something good to be able to have this honor. So thank you, New Duck Bookstore, and thank you, Roxanne Gay, for being here. I want to read your formal bio from your publicist because I think that's appropriate, but then I want to use some of your own words to introduce you. Roxanne Gay's writing appears in Best American Mystery Stories 2014, Best American Short Stories 2012, Best Sex Writing 2012, A Public Space, McSweeney's, Tin House, Oxford American, American Short Fiction, Virginia Quarterly Review, and many others. She's a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. She's the author of the books I.T., An Untamed State, the New York Times bestselling Bad Feminist, the nationally bestselling Difficult Women, and the New York Times bestselling Hunger. She is also the author of World of Wakanda for Marvel. She has several books forthcoming and is also at work on television and film projects. She also has a newsletter, The Audacity, and once had a podcast, The Roxanne Gay Agenda. I have been searching and looking and listening to your voice, and as I prepared for this, and I love that the Washington Post describes you as a strikingly fresh cultural critic. But in your own words, you describe yourself here and there as relevant, interesting, sometimes funny, economic as possible, expanding empathy, opening minds, saying what you really feel and think, a bad feminist. On the page, I get to be the boldest, most audacious version of myself. And maybe my favorite, raucous and ungovernable. Tonight, you're here to talk about your new book, Opinions. And tonight, for all of you, there's going to be a part where you read, if you'd like. Would you like to read?
This one works. There we go.
There
I
we
don't
go.
have to, but I mean, I also can. I have plenty to read.
Do you have a favorite piece?
They're all my babies.
Yes,
But-
it's not fair.
No, but I think my favorite, of course, is I wrote an essay, an ode to the Fast and Furious, aka. And so I love the Fast and Furious movies, and any opportunity to evangelize about their greatness is a good one.
Well, maybe what I'm hoping to do is ask you some questions. Maybe play a game. I'm looking at how many questions you've been answering about the book. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to answer some very fast, quick questions that just help us. Because when I come to these kind of things, I want to get to know the person. I want to hear their voice read something they adore from their writing. And then I want to just ask my own question about the book. So does that sound like a good idea? All right. So if I hand you this, and I don't know if we need another, is that one still working for you?
Now I don't even know what page it's on, but I have a general idea. You know what? I'll read about how much I hate the beach. Because I really, really do. Oh, it's so bad. And so this is a piece I wrote several years ago when I was teaching. I was doing a guest teaching stint at Florida Atlantic University. And for like 5 days of the week, I was living with my parents, which was actually fine. And 2 days a week, I was staying in Miami and like commuting up to Boca because nobody wants to stay in Boca Raton. It's not good. So this is just about the beach. It is summer, and so we are repeatedly reminded It is time for the beach. Beach bodies, beach reeds, fruity beach drinks in tall glasses festooned with tiny paper umbrellas and fruit skewered on tiny plastic swords. This is an ideal beach of hot sun, warm sand, crystal clear water that leaves your skin salted, but it is all too often a mirage. I have known beaches. When I was a child, my parents took my brothers and me to Port-au-Prince during the summer so we could get to know the country of our ancestors. Because Haiti is an island of beaches everywhere. Haitians are particular, even snobby about beaches. We scoff at the beaches of other Caribbean islands or, heaven forbid, Hawaii. And let us not speak of continental American beaches because nowhere in the world we know with certainty is the water warmer and clearer. Nowhere is the sand whiter or more willing to embrace our warm flesh. In Haiti, beach bodies are simply bodies, and beach reads are simply books because the beach is all around you. Here in the United States, it is similar for those who live on the coasts. The beach is 5 miles away from my parents' home in Florida. They have lived there for more than 15 years, and they have been to the beach once to take guests who were visiting. But for the rest of us, the beach exerts a different kind of gravitational pull. 61% of Americans don't live anywhere near the beach. We spend a surprising amount of time hearing about this place that we will hardly ever see. We watch commercials, TV shows, and movies in which nubile young women and their strapping male counterparts frolic on sand, their hair golden and sun-streaked. Long walks on the beach are the supposed holy grail of a romantic evening. The beach becomes a kind of utopia, the place where all of our dreams can come true. I have known beaches, but I have no particular fondness for them. I don't like sand in my crevices. I don't like sand at all. I don't enjoy that sunshine and heat without the benefit of climate control. I don't enjoy other people at the beach. Sticky children, young people with firm bodies and scanty bathing suits, those of less firm bodies staring forlornly at the spectacle. People bring pets, and I am not an animal person. No, I do not want to pet your dog. After 10 minutes, I'm bored. What are we supposed to do at the beach? And I'm Black. And so I understand sunbathing as a concept, but less so as an activity. How long am I supposed to lie in the sun? When do I turn myself over like a roasting meat on a spit? How often do I apply this sunscreen you speak of? I do not like bathing suits. There is so little material involved, and they ride up in places where there should be no riding. They are not flattering for many body types because a beach body is a very specific, slender, toned, and tan body. The rest of us, if we dare show up at the beach, should probably don caftans neck to toe. Wearing a bathing suit on a beach would leave me exposed in ways that terrify me. No clothing to hide behind, so much flesh spilling available for modern age demands, amateur photography, in which I end up as the water lapping gently on the shore, but honestly, it's not that much fun to get into. Sometimes there are creatures and slimy lengths of seaweed and sharp things at the bottom. Unlike the swimming pool, there is no chlorine at the beach, and I am quite certain that people are using the ocean as their vast personal toilet. It is an unfathomable stretch of water that holds too much potential for treachery, and of course, let us not forget sharks. It is no better up on the sand. Beach seating is uncomfortable, particularly when you are tall. There my feet are, hanging over the edge of the chaise, or I'm in some kind of lawn chair, my parts sticking to polyester in ways that will leave firmly indented patterns. Reading at the beach is an ordeal, trying to find a comfortable position, keeping the sand out of the book and sun out of my eyes, managing the pages if there is a strong breeze. Soon enough, my sunglasses start sliding down my face. Once I drove down to Key West, which is basically New Orleans on the beach, loud, grimy, abundant in alcohol. I saw the southernmost city in the continental United States and waited in a line of tourists to hug the marker and have my picture taken. I stepped carefully onto those strange undulations of sand and I thought, this is pretty and all, but I could die without ever having this experience again. The beach is a place that is far lovelier in theory than in practice. Summer itself is also lovelier in theory than practice. Despite the best efforts of splashy magazines trying to hype us up, Get ready for summer, they say, when they should be saying, prepare for inconsistent weather, humidity, disappointment, and dreams deferred. I always have grand plans for myself each summer. I teach, and throughout the academic year, my colleagues and I wax wistful about all of the things that we're going to do when spring semester ends. We will read, and it will be luxurious because we will be reading for ourselves. We will travel, and not to attend a conference. And of course, we will diligently prepare for our fall courses. I have thus far spent my summer watching an inordinate amount of Barefoot Contessa on the Food Network. It will never be what we want it to be, and yet we cannot help but hold on to this vision of summer, of the beach, of contentment. Despite my better judgment, I am also vulnerable to this fantasy. So much trembling want. It is an unattainable ideal that we never quite reach, but somehow it remains enough. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad that you chose that because I have one question before I do this rapid fire. And the question, I've been listening to your voice and listening to videos and even in reading opinion, there's so much space that you leave, even for the things that you dislike the most. There's a gracious kindness in it. Even when you're angry, to be someone who called yourself a bad feminist, to be a difficult woman, there is this kindness, this space. So I wanted to ask you, I traced it back in the book, potentially, to one line in the chapter on Insatiable from the series of books. And you said, quote, you were asked to sign a change.com petition to end that. And you said, I won't sign it, quote, because creators are allowed to make bad, irresponsible, problematic art. But in the next line, you draw a line at dangerous art. And I love the takedown of Insatiable that follows that it's actually dangerous. What would be your criteria for dangerous art? And should any art be canceled or just critiqued? And is that enough? I don't think any art should be canceled because that is a really slippery slope. Once you start canceling art you don't approve of, other people are going to take that as cover to cancel the art they disapprove of, and oftentimes that's going to be the art that is created by marginalized creators that depicts things that make people uncomfortable. And discomfort is not inherently a bad thing. So really, it's just that everything is open to critique. And I think critique can be productive. I think critique is healthy. I think it makes us better creators. Well, if we're willing to be open to the critique. Not in the immediate. Like in the immediate, I'm gonna feel my fucking feelings. Thank you. But then I'm gonna sit with it and say, what here in this critique is valid and what is not. And then I proceed accordingly. And with Insatiable, what I found dangerous about it is that it was a television show, I think on Netflix, and it was predicated on the idea that this woman is brutally attacked in a parking lot and her jaw is broken and it is sewn shut while it heals, wired shut, and she loses weight and becomes popular. And it's the idea that thinness is so desired that we are willing to be brutalized in order to achieve it. And the reality is that it's absolutely true when you look at the kinds of things that people, and women in particular, do to their bodies in order to lose weight. The kind of risks that we are willing to take because we understand thinness is currency. So absolutely, it is dangerous because so many young women are going to watch a show like that and think, oh, maybe I should get my jaw wired shut. And for a time, that was actually a form of weight loss. This is great. For a time, that actually was a form of weight loss surgery, having your jaw wired shut, and then people would just drink their dinner through a straw, and not ironically. So I really do believe in robust critique. And unfortunately, people don't seem to have the capacity to recognize what critique is. Oftentimes I'll critique something and someone will say, why are you trying to ruin his career? And I'm like, he's a multi-millionaire. And I am a professor in the English department. perhaps we should manage our expectations here about the length of the reach of my power. Thank you so much for that. It seems really, really important to draw that line, but to also understand what it means to have dangerous art. And I love that you ended with talking about your power. I have one more serious question about power, and then I'm going to go to the. In the face of the past 40 years of occupation and violence, and ongoing violence in Israel and Palestine, people have been making crucial connections between narrative, diplomacy, and war, and especially xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and the violences committed in the name of all three of those things in this moment around the world. You write in the intro to Opinions, you write about people contacting you, and you say, and you talk about your work as instigation. You use the word instigation. And you write about readers thinking that you have more power than you do. What do you think is the beginning and the end of your power as a writer, especially at this moment?
That's a great question. I think the beginning and end of my power is that I'm trying to encourage conversation, that I'm trying to articulate a point of view, and you can agree or disagree or somewhere in between those two things. That's it. And if I can make you at least consider an alternative point of view, I feel like I have used my power in an effective way. And other times I'm using my power, for lack of a better word, to bring attention to issues that perhaps are not being covered in the ways that they deserve to be covered. And oftentimes those are issues that concern marginalized populations. Generally, when we're spoken about in the mainstream, it's from a place of being problematic, from a place of being a problem that is in need of a solution. And I do believe that our lives are much richer than that. And we should be able to share the richness of our lives and the complexity and the nuance in our lives, and not only be framed as problems. And so when you can do that, when you can use your voice and try and reach people in that way, I think it's incredibly important. The challenge becomes that once you start to use your voice, people kind of treat you like a vending machine. Something is happening and I want to know what you think. And my question is why? And I understand in general why, because I seem to have quite a lot of opinions, enough to put a book together. But oftentimes what people are, they're not really asking what you think. They want you to affirm what they think. And I think we've seen that quite a lot in the past 2 weeks, where I have never gotten more hate mail in my life than the past 2 weeks because I haven't written on a complex topic that people have not been able to solve for 75 years and frankly millennia. And it's been really interesting because it's from both Jewish people and Palestinians and people who have affinity with Palestinians, which I would hope is all of us. And it's been surreal because just because I'm not writing about it doesn't mean I'm not talking about it, thinking about it, worried about it. And sometimes you don't necessarily have thoughts that you want to share with the general public. I mean, we see what happens when people share their thoughts. It doesn't matter what you say. I've been reposting people's thoughts. And when I posted about anti-Semitism, people were like, that's all propaganda. And I'm like, my wife is Jewish. I'm crystal clear on the fact that this is happening every single day. And when I post about Islamophobia, people are like, that's propaganda. It's Hamas propaganda. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. We are so lost. We are so broken. And in those moments, I feel like my power is really quite ineffective. And I think all of us are feeling that way right now because some of these problems feel incredibly intractable. And we have a lot of people with guns who think violence is the solution, when clearly, no, that is not the solution.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I had a question at the end about the way which you also refuse in silence is a way of refusing people's push to make you hope for things where you don't have hope. And I wanted to just highlight how
I really took away something really important about your suggestion that pausing has been really important for you and what the role of pausing is. I don't know if you want to talk about that, since it fits with.
Well, when you first start out as an opinion writer, you have to just take work where you can get it. And you are often asked to opine within a matter of hours when something calamitous happens, when there's a big moment. And you do it because that's the only way that you're going to get work. And for whatever reason, most writers are able to do it reasonably well, all things considered, when you look at the material constraints that you're up against. And then the magazine's like, here's $50, congratulations. As I've gotten older and as I've gotten deeper into my career, I have had the privilege of not necessarily having to respond in the immediate. And I have really enjoyed that pause because I don't actually know what I think or feel about most things within a matter of hours. I don't. And especially now in this age of misinformation, we can't respond to bad information. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible. And so I think pausing, there's a lot of integrity in that. It's not weakness. It's not apathy. Sometimes, and also we don't know. This idea that we should be certain about everything. I mean, I'm certain about key things. I'm certain about what genocide is, for example. I'm certain about what suffering is. But I am not certain I am the most appropriate voice to speak to issues for which people have developed decades of expertise. Like, let's listen to the experts in this time and people who have material experience and have something, I think, useful to say. All I can say is this is horrifying, and we should all be doing everything in our power to try and make it stop. And for most of us, that means calling our elected officials and saying, perhaps these billions of dollars could be better spent in other ways. But there are experts out there, and when things happen on an international scale, international affairs, I read the news, I follow the news every day, but I'm not an expert. That's just not what I've spent my life doing. But this time around, I thought, well, yeah, this is not something I'm an expert on, but if only there was a tool and one could use to learn things. Maybe it's called a book. And so I've been doing a lot of reading. And right now I'm reading My Promised Land, The Tragedy and the Triumph of Israel by Ari Shavit. And it's astonishing. And I highly recommend it if you want to have a good understanding of the state of Israel and Palestine and the history between the two peoples and the two lands. And it's very well done. It's very honest. It's very pragmatic. He's Jewish, he's Israeli, and he grapples with the challenges of that. And there are many other books, and I'm going to get to them, but this book is 550 pages long. So, one day at a time. And so I also encourage people in these pauses, you don't have to be still, you don't have to be doing nothing. You can do something productive in that pause, and that is oftentimes turn to people who are speaking eloquently and in an informed manner on complex issues.
Thank you so much. I hope people will take away the elegance and the wisdom of pause and silence as you write it into a book about opinions. Okay, I'm gonna do this, and you can just off the top of your head, or you can say pass. This is an exercise I had to do in a class. You can all do this for yourself if you have something to write with. And are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What is the most juicy texture for you?
I'm not passing. I think my answer is clear.
Okay. The most juicy sound.
See above.
What are the most creative parts of your body?
That's a good question. I would say my hands.
Where are you most alive? That could be like where in the world?
Yeah,
where?
no, that's a great question. I would say
geographically, I'm most alive in Los Angeles.
What parts of your body would you most like to realign and reconnect with?
The whole thing.
What part of you most needs to be refreshed?
The whole thing.
What seeds are you planting in your own garden?
Literally, tomatoes, basil, thyme, but I'm actually not doing the planting. My wife is the gardener, and I reap the benefits, and I'm also the cook. But the seeds I'm planting are trying to enjoy the rewards of this relentless pace that I've been keeping up for the past 20 years. It's really hard. Many years ago, a friend of mine, a writer named Blake Butler, told me that with each new success, the amount of time between when you learn of the success or experience it and when you are moving on to the next thing gets smaller and smaller. And it's true. It's so sad to notice it. Like, I won an award. Great. 5 minutes later, okay, I have a meeting. Like, I don't even like dwell on it anymore. And so I'm trying to stop that, to pause and try and just sit in, like, you don't actually have to do anything here. You can just sit and enjoy your life for a minute. So that's been good.
Nice. I'm going to ask you all to be involved in a somatic experiment then that will contribute to pausing. I'm wondering if you can rub your hands together to make as much heat as you can. Love your heat, heat. And then just, do you feel it? It's getting hot? Okay, put it somewhere where you need it. All right, do it again. More heat. I need to feel it like, whoo. And can you please shine it on our guest?
This is a beautiful image from here, I have to say. Thank you all, truly.
That was just a pause. Just enjoy.
It was wonderful. What a great idea.
And good for if you don't really prefer to be touched and kissed.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about it. And like, yes, I'm feeling this, but we don't actually have to connect.
Okay. What is your favorite creative reclamation landscape? And that just means where do you recharge? Like what landscape do you recharge in? Fictive, in your mind, in the world?
At home, in my bed, reading. I read for pleasure every single day. That's the one thing I do for myself. And I love it. And I'll read anything. I am getting into Brittany's memoir. And it's so good. Oh my God. First of all, the way she gives Justin Timberlake the business. For all of us who want justice for Janet Jackson. It begins. It's actually a really good book. I enjoy celebrity memoirs sometimes, not always, but like Gucci Mane, the autobiography of Gucci Mane, 10 out of 10. And this is about as good. So it's reading.
Beautiful. Home, domestic landscapes.
Yes.
What most, and this is one word, excites, scares you?
Oh. Change. I am a creature of comfort. Like, I don't want anything to change ever. And yet, when something is about to change, there is an excitement and a terror there that I find interesting. The excitement is something good could happen, and the terror is probably not.
What new commitment are you making to yourself?
My new commitment that I'm making to myself is one that I've been working on for a while now, which is recognizing that I have a right to stand up for myself, to say no. Like on the page, like I mean that I am the bravest, boldest version of myself, but in my day-to-day life, not so much. And I am married to a Scorpio, and she's incredible. And like, one day we were walking down the street. We split our time between Manhattan and Los Angeles. And I noticed that she never moves out of the way on the sidewalk. And she's tiny. And it's like, and I'm always like practically pushing myself into the building as if I could enter the brick. And here she is, she doesn't budge. And I was like, one day I was like, babe, you never move. And she's like, why would I? And so I'm trying to bring that into my life a little more. And it's not rude, it's merely, I want to stop assuming that I'm the one who has to contort myself to make everyone else comfortable.
I love that.
Yeah, you should watch her walk down the street. First of all, I'm always like, I will catch up.
It's really, walking down the street is actually 500 years of history in play, and the choreography that we do with our bodies, right?
Absolutely.
So there's some privilege in not having to learn that, and learning that is so amazing. If you do try this on your own, and you will get hit. That's just the thing.
Yes, you have to prepare.
I'm going to ask you a question about love, because you just lit up when you said you should see her walk down the street. These are really quick. What is your dream?
Oh, I'm living my dream.
What concerns you most about the future?
I feel like it's been ongoing, but since 2016, it feels like we are on not a good trajectory as a people, as a world. Every form of bigotry has made a resurgence, and it's all punishment for a Black president. And that is a lot to tangle with. And it is really concerning me because it seems like we are, if not already in World War III, we are on the precipice of World War III. And this time, I don't know that there are any checks and balances globally. I don't think that the world leaders care anymore about nuclear power. I think they will unleash it. And I don't mean that in a sort of everything is terrible way, but in a sort of like I'm awake way. And I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about the most vulnerable people, not only here, but abroad. It just seems like there's less and less care being given to the people that need the care the most. And that's concerning.
That was one of the parts of the book. There were 3 places where I really felt like crying. And actually, that was one, that awareness that it's not about difference that's tearing us apart, that we won't protect people. Refugees, especially children.
Yes, this idea that people don't need protection or that we should all protect ourselves, that's never how anything has worked throughout the whole of history. And when we have left people to their own devices to protect themselves, we have seen what has happened. The Holocaust, the way that this country is stolen land, enslavement. That's what happens when you don't protect people, when we decide that we're all supposed to function as individuals. We're also seeing that in the Middle East. It's everywhere. And so let's take a step back and ask ourselves why we do not want to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. Because I think we would all be better off if we did.
Yes, it's strange. It's very terrifying to be in a place where the answer is everyone should just get their own gun.
Yes, I actually am writing an essay about that right now. It's coming out in next year in May or June, and it's about Black feminism and gun ownership because I'm really interested in that. I live in LA. We live near the LAX gun range, and when I first started going there, my brother's a gun nut, and all along he's been like, "You have to get into guns," and I'm like, "No, thank you. I'm a feminist." And he was like, "What does that have to do with anything?" And I'm like, "You should read my book." So I started going to this gun range, and I live in Inglewood in LA, so it's a predominantly Black community. And when I went there, it was always Black women. And I was like, wow, that's not what I would have guessed. And, most of our dominant narratives around guns are about white men because they're the ones who take them and do the most terrible things with them. And so that just got me thinking, what is going on here? what is the relationship between women and then more specifically Black women and guns? And why are we all told if we're vulnerable, this is the best way to protect ourselves? Like the fucking Wild West. It's just crazy. And people who are super, super into guns genuinely believe this. And I used to live in the Midwest most of my life and in open carry states. And you haven't lived until you've been at the coffee shop or the gas station at 7 a.m. and here comes Ted in his surf shorts and his t-shirt with a gun on his waist. And it's like, sir, what do you think that coffee's gonna do to you? It's wild.
Pause.
Pause.
This is the last fast question, and then I'm gonna ask you the slow question on love.
Okay.
What most represents your desires and yearnings?
My writing, for sure. I think my writing is this huge canvas that I throw all of my desires and yearnings on. And it's always been that way. When I was very young, I would write just for myself. I still write for myself, but I would put all of my hopes and dreams and fears and frustrations on the page and I would call it fiction. And, that's always just been the vessel that holds it all.
Do you remember your first poem?
Oh, I remember my last poem. I was like 19. I had just been dumped, and I wrote a poem called called Tears. And the first line was, "I am crying tears." Yeah, I'm a great poet.
I think that needs to see the light of day.
But no, I
Just
saved it so that I would know, like, girl, poetry's not for you.
okay, but love is for you. And I love that you defined, well, you said in an interview that being in love, being in love and having sex can't be unlinked for you,
For me, yes.
which is delightful. And then you said love is rowdy. Oh, no. Then you said love is raw and unruly. Can you just say more about that? That's a beautiful definition of love.
Well, oftentimes when we talk about love, and love is different for everyone, and I think we all have our individual definitions of love, and they're all valid. But when I think about love, oftentimes it's not like in this beautiful, tidy way. Sometimes it's just very unruly, and it's very like it's the barest parts of ourselves. And I embrace that. I think it's exciting, um, and so that's what I was thinking about when I said that. It's like, talk about deep cuts. Wow.
I'm sure people have a million questions, and I don't know how the bookstore would like to do that, but you might plan and let me know how you want to do that, and know that I'm going to make sure that it is a young woman of color who gets the last question.
And the first.
And the first. Okay, so let that be one. Maybe it's a good way to introduce that. I've read that there are two definitions of racial reckoning. One, and this is by a CNN, and I should be saying his name, a CNN reporter he used racial reckoning first, and then it spread like wildfire. Wrote an article said, "Has there been one?" And he suggested people hold two different definitions. One is that in this case, white people are so shocked by something that they have feelings about it. And that's reckoning. The other definition of reckoning is that experience is so transformative that they do something different, become something different, and life changes for everyday Black and brown people. And so this writer ends up saying, if you're going to ask the question, has there been a racial reckoning? It is an absolutely clear and deafening no. And my question is, do you think there's been a racial reckoning in any definition? And if not, where are we on this trajectory of this movement for Black Lives Matter?
No, there has not been a racial reckoning in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's been one of the more painful parts of the past several years. When George Floyd was murdered, I think a lot of us thought not that miracles were going to happen, but that it was the beginning of something. And there was a moment where a lot of white people began to recognize that what activists have been discussing for many, many years, they finally understood it. Because here was a case, even though there were several before, but this was one of those cases that was so horrifying. And 9 minutes. It just something about that, and I think because everyone was at home, most of us were at home, isolating during the sort of height of COVID. I think people just thought, wow, I'm going to really sit and think about this for once. And then they read a bunch of those books written for white people about race. And I mean, I'm happy for you guys to read those books, but you need to be reading like some Sister Soldier and like some real books that are not written for white people, that won't make you comfortable, and won't put the onus of racial reparation on the backs of Black people. And so we're just very far away from racial reckoning. I don't know that white people, broadly speaking, are capable of it because it's too much discomfort and it's too much having to recognize that everything that you have is on the backs of people of color in one way or another. And all of the privilege, the way that you live your lives, the safety that you enjoy is something that was stolen from someone else. Nobody wants to face that. And I think any of us with privilege, and most of us, at least in this country, have some form of privilege. And I write about that a lot. Like we all have privilege. It's hard to reckon with who pays the price for your privilege. It's uncomfortable. It makes you wonder, what am I supposed to do? And most people just want to stop the conversation there because the answers might be difficult. Nobody wants to give up anything. It's like, yeah, I want racial equality. I want equity in the world, but I don't want to have to cede any of my position or power in order to get there. And so until people are willing to cede their position and power, we will not begin to have a racial reckoning.
Cheerful,
I know.
but very real.
Yeah.
And it gives us space, which you make in all your writing, in all your opinions, for possible change.
Yeah, the thing is, there is possibility for change. I think that we are all capable of it. It's just challenging and incremental. And a lot of the change that is needed in this world is needed so profoundly that we wish that there were these easier or more immediate solutions. And unfortunately, there aren't. These are things that took generations to make, and it's going to take generations to unmake. And recognizing that first and foremost, I think creates a lot of room for possibility, that it doesn't all have to happen now, but it sure does need to start now.
Whew. I'm going to take a chance and ask you a very personal question. The other fast questions you can just pass. In 2023, for a Black woman and a Jewish woman to find space to love and to have a marriage, is there anything in that, the daily reckonings, that you think are the beginning of that change?
I think a lot of people would like to believe that once you taste the rainbow, the world will become a better place. But if that were the case, we would have achieved racial reckoning already. I know a lot of people who are married to racist ass motherfuckers, or dating them, and they just overlook Bob's racism because he loves me and he loves the kids. Does he? But I do think that yes, there can be, but we can't look to that to be the cure-all, that if we all just blend, it's going to be okay. But what does work, at least in our relationship, and in the relationships of many of the people we know, is that it's an ongoing conversation. And we learn to listen as, because I'm often very solution oriented. So when she wants to tell me something, I'm like immediately there with problems, with solutions or responses. Like the other day, she was like, I want to talk about what's going on, but I don't want to have to apologize for how I feel. And I was like, I'm just going to shut the fuck up and listen. And I did, because she wanted to talk about, and I have permission to talk about this. She wanted to talk about how she's afraid, and she's worried for her people and her community, and she's worried for Israel, and she's horrified also by what's happening, and she doesn't know how to hold space for all of that. And I recognized that it wasn't for me to provide solutions or critique. It was just for me to listen, because there are things I will never understand about where she's coming from. And that's okay. I think the minute we recognize that we can be there without having a complete understanding, that progress happens there. Because all too often we think, oh, because I get it, I get it. Let's, just take the baby step first. Let's just listen. So in finding ways to listen and to learn and to recognize when you've made a mistake or a misstep, that can be really useful. But how we can then, and to use a tech term, scale it beyond romantic relationships or friendships to a cultural shift, I don't know how we do that. And if we could have, I think it would have happened by now. I would have liked to believe that it could.
I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I still feel radical hope, maybe not optimism, but maybe in the pausing and just listening without understanding to be able to even get it wrong. Maybe that is radical. And to see what that would look like between institutions, between communities, between nations, it makes me, isn't that what's needed right now? Listening. I'm gonna pause. So thank you. Thank you. Can you just? Thank you. We have time, and we get to go over 7 because we started late. So I know someone is around with a beautiful mic. I guess you just put your hand up. There's no other
Throw
way.
your hand up, and young Milo here will bring you a microphone. Oh, even better. Hey.
Hi. My question is, I know you've written across many genres. I was wondering if there is an area that you haven't written in that you would like to explore, and what would you write?
Yeah, I have actually been really fortunate to write in pretty much every genre I want to write in, but I would like to get better at screenwriting. I'm doing screenwriting. I actually adapted An Untamed State into a movie with Gina Prince Bythewood, and then Disney bought Fox. And they were like, can you take the kidnapping out? I was like, just say you don't want to make it. It's about a kidnapping. And then I recently finished adapting Hunger into a movie, and it's going to be on Lifetime. Once the writer's strike, not the writer's strike, waiting for the actor's strike to wrap up so we can start casting. Until we actually start filming, I'm not going to believe it, but rumor has it where they're actually going to make it. And so that's fun. But I'm still a baby screenwriter, and it's fun, and people are like, it's easy. Well, yeah, it's easy to write a screenplay, but it's not easy to write a good screenplay. And so I really want to get better, and I'm currently teaching at Rutgers in a 3-year position. Gloria Steinem has this endowed chair in media studies there, and I get to do that amazing job. And when that's done, I'm gonna take a break from teaching, maybe forever. The bureaucracy of academia is a bit much for me. I just have no patience for it anymore. I got tenure at Purdue, I'm done. Like, I have nothing left to prove. It's just like, Like when my dean comes and tells me some shit, I'm just like, why are you doing this to me? I didn't deserve this. And we get along, but it's just too much. I don't like the bureaucracy. So when that's done, I hope to be able to just spend more time focusing on speed writing. And actually, I want to take a couple classes. I'm not above it. I love taking classes. Okay.
There's someone behind this pole as well, so you don't miss them.
Hi, I wanted to ask, is one a bad person for avoiding traumatic acts, say it would be like two? Like if you find out too traumatic and you avoid engaging in that sort of acts, is that a bad thing?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
I was asking if it's a bad thing for one to avoid engaging with traumatic acts, say a movie like Tail. Emmett Till, the Emmett movie.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's wrong. I think that we do the best that we can as often as we can. And sometimes I think we can't engage for whatever reason. And we do tend to judge that rather harshly. And we tend to assume that everyone has the capacity to engage with trauma. And sometimes I don't think we do. And when you see people engage with trauma who don't have the capacity, the results are really messy and unfortunate. And speaking of dangerous, that can be incredibly dangerous.
Did everyone hear the question? I think, and I'm not speaking for you, but just if you do get the mic, just really don't be afraid to speak into it. It's really that difference. I think it was, is it wrong to not want to engage with traumatic art like the movie on Emmett Till? So that was the answer.
Yeah, it's not wrong at all.
I haven't seen Mississippi Burning. It came out, and I'm not sure what I'm committed to not seeing any movies with lynchings. I don't want to do it. When I learned when I had a kid that all images stay emblazoned in your brain for the rest of your life, we stopped watching the evening news with our 1-year-old. Like, not good. So I don't need any more lynching images at all.
Yeah, I mean, after 12 years a slave, I was done with movies about enslavement. It was a well done movie. There's nothing wrong with the movie, but I personally don't need to see any more. I understand what happened in slavery. I've got the gist. And I also thought I wouldn't read any more books about it, fiction, but I have. Jessamine Ward's Let Us Descend is extraordinary, and I can't recommend it enough. And oh my goodness, the one about the two gay men. The Prophets. Thank you. That book was robbed of the National Book Award. Let's start there and work our way down. It was also robbed of the Pulitzer. It's the finest book I think I've ever read in my life, and it's just extraordinary. Again, what I liked about both of those books is that they did something different with familiar narratives about enslavement. But I think we should all make the decisions that we need to make in order to get through. And not engaging with traumatic art doesn't mean, it's not a judgment on you. It's just a choice. And I often think it's a healthy choice. The world is very traumatizing. There's a lot of traumatizing art out there. I think it's useful for it to be made. If that's what you're called to make, then you have to make it. But we are not all called to consume it.
I love that. Thank you. More questions?
Got one over here. Hi, sorry, coming back here. Across your body of work, what do you consider to be your most important work, and has that changed over time?
Well, I'll give you two answers. I'll give you the funny answer and then the serious answer. I think my most important work is anything I have to say about Beyonce. Did you see? Oh God. She has a new perfume coming out, and the little video she put on the internet when she was like, I wanted it to be a monolithic, and I was like, what do you mean there? I've watched it 20 times. Like, what does she mean by monolith? Does it mean the same thing for her that it means for me? I love her. I love everything about her. Renaissance was incredible. LA did okay with the mute challenge. Not great. Not great. There was a girl who kept screaming. And I get it though. It's Beyonce. We all wanted to scream. And seriously, I think my most important work was Hunger. Not because it's a memoir, but because it's taught in medical schools. And it's taught in a lot of medical schools now. And many medical practitioners, from doctors to nurses to radiology techs, have told me either in person or via mail that I have helped them rethink how they work with their patients. And if I can give one fat person a modicum of dignity in the medical profession, which is incredibly a traumatizing experience all around, I will have done enough in this lifetime. And so that's my most important work, because doctors are horrible. Yeah, just throw those hands up, we'll get to them.
Hi.
Hi,
Speaking to the mic. Hi.
there we go. Use that voice.
A couple of things. One, I was actually going to ask you about a Beyonce self-covered. And two, Britney's book, incredible.
I
thus
mean,
far.
the Bible.
It is so good. But my question for you, as a person who has been reading since I was 4, the coolest thing, or I thought then, was that people are writing books that I get to read, right? But as I've gotten older, I'm 28 now, and with the age of social media, one thing I've noticed is the proximity to authors has gotten incredibly, almost too close, right? And a part of me enjoys it because, like, for example, I follow you on Twitter, and it's wonderful to be able to connect the art there with the book, with the person. But my question to you is, has that proximity over time, have you seen it in is it more of a positive light, or has it been more of like a challenging space to live in?
That's a phenomenal question. Thank you for asking. I think about it a lot. When I first went on Twitter, I was living in Hancock, Michigan, and I was getting my PhD at Michigan Tech, and Hancock Houghton is 10 hours north of Detroit. Like, it's the end of the world. Yeah? Is there a Uber in the house? Beautiful country, very isolated. And I wanted to feel connection to a creative community. And I went on Twitter and I was like, oh my God, I can talk to writers I like, and they're gonna answer me? And I remember Matt Johnson at the time had like 50,000 followers, and I thought, how does a writer get that many followers? It was remarkable to me. Social media has changed a lot over the past 17 years. It used to be really kind of fun and quirky and like, hey, I had yogurt for breakfast. And someone would be like, what brand? Oh, they're terrible. Just normal, healthy conversation. And some of that does still happen, but as social media companies have taken the guardrails off, there has been a lot more hatred, a lot more trolling. It's getting darker. It feels much more dangerous. And I think a lot of public figures have gotten, and I include myself in this, a lot more brittle. And when you endure so much harassment online, everything becomes a problem. And you have no tolerance or patience left. And then you find yourself popping off at someone who really didn't mean any harm, but you can't tell the difference anymore because you're so prepared for nonsense. And that part, I think, is sad. And that's where I feel like, yes, it's gotten too close because I'm just oversensitive now. And I haven't been stepping away from Twitter for about a year now because I found myself being way overly invested, and my feelings were getting way too hurt just by nonsense all day, every day. There's always going to be some unhappy person on Twitter, most of it like men, who want to like debate me. Let's debate. I have have a life. I have friends. And I'm sorry you don't, but I'm not here to do all that. And I just, I find myself, it's not pleasant. It's not fun anymore. And that's why I spend my time on TikTok. Where I can just watch men fix the hooves of cows. My algorithm is tight. But thank you for the question. You've been having your hand up for a long time. Oh, well, we'll come to you.
Hi. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, just hold it close to your mouth.
Okay. You talked earlier about taking up space and, as a woman of color, there traditionally hasn't been a lot of space for us. And specifically, I'm Indian, and there hasn't been a lot about people who look like me in American culture. Just recently, has there started to, have like TV shows and books about it. But, it was a real struggle for me growing up. The closest thing I had was Princess Jasmine, and that's not even accurate. She's like from the Middle East. But how do you I'm sure you've kind of had a similar experience growing up. So how do you kind of deal with that growing up and not seeing anyone that looks like you, that represents you, and has a similar life experience to you? As you've gotten older, how do you look back on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We often say representation matters, and the reason we say that is because it's true. It's not that you need to see exact reflections of your life, but you need to see possibility. And you need to see that other people like you exist. And when I was growing up, first of all, I wasn't really allowed to watch TV. We were allowed 1 hour a week. And it had to be like good stuff. So Highway to Heaven. My parents were very Catholic. Or Little House on the Prairie. Or The Cosby Show. And when The Cosby Show came out, I was like, wow. Because there have been other shows about Black people, but I grew up in a middle class home in the suburbs of Omaha, Nebraska. And it's not that it was a one-to-one translation of my life, but it was this amazing married parents who bantered and had fun, and all of these siblings who had little hijinks. And it felt relatable. And it showed me like this world of possibility, especially when Denise went to Hillman and a different world came on. And I loved those shows and that representation. And it's just a travesty that legacy, he decided to destroy it by becoming a serial rapist. But that was kind of it. And I know that I was better for having that representation. Oftentimes when we talk about representation, we distill it to black and white, and we forget about the Asian community, the Latino community, the South Asian community, the Middle Eastern community. There are all kinds of people of color in the world, and you're right, we're just now starting to breach that gap, but there's so much work to be done. And there's no easy answer other than, of course, begging the power brokers, publishers, television executives, film executives to increase representation, to recognize that these stories have value. And it's not just about representation, I'm sorry, but there are just incredible storytellers out there putting work into the world. Let's give it a shot. Let's put it out there on Netflix and Hulu and all of these other streamers instead of like yet another show about white teenagers. We're good. We have a clear understanding of their lives and their dramas. Dawson's Creek is right there for us. And like the show Outer Banks, like there's enough there. And it's, people often distill this to supply and demand, but the demand is there, and the demand is practically desperate. And we just have to keep lobbying for it and demanding it and hoping that they'll give us that supply. But it's frustrating and it's really challenging when you don't have anything that reflects your life. It makes you wonder, where do I belong? what are the possibilities for my life? And because we live in such a segregated world and such a divided world, it's often unfortunate that the only thing we do have to look toward is pop culture, film, television, comic books, which are actually better than most genres, and that's saying something. Books, of course, which getting better again, but incrementally. So I hear you, and I hope that in the next several years that we do start to see a broader range of representation and that we complicate the conversation around diversity and inclusion because it does everyone a disservice when we limit it to just black and white. Yeah, I see you guys. They're gonna come forward again. I feel it.
Hi, Roxanne. I have a question for you about your dynamic between what you know and how it comes on the page. The idea that we write to figure out what we don't know, that the process of writing helps us with that. And when you write your essays, how often are you coming with your opinion in your mind and then transmitting it to the page versus figuring it out in the process of writing? And has there been a time where you thought you knew and then in the writing, your opinion changed?
Yeah, it just depends. It's both ways. Sometimes I go into something and I'm like, I know what I think and I'm going to say it a lot. And other times I'm not quite sure what I think and I do a lot of research and that research may or may not make it onto the page because most opinion essays, especially for the Times, are between 900 and 1,500 words. You can only do so much in that space. But the research that I do, the reading, trying to get some depth and rigor, it informs what I'm going to put on the page. Sometimes I do start writing an essay and I'm like, actually, what I thought, I did not think. That was a good little line. And those are always interesting, and I think they make for actually pretty good essays because I like to show my math and show my thought process and how I come to a conclusion or a lack of a conclusion or a shift in my thinking. And I think that can be interesting for readers because a lot of times we are in that very same place as we're trying to figure out what we think and feel. And that's actually why people read opinion writing. It's not because they want to be told what to think, but they want to know what the possible options are out there and what are other people thinking so that I can start to draw my own conclusions. So yeah, that does happen, and I find that exciting.
Hi.
Hi. Oh wow, you just popped up.
I would love to hear anything you can share about the book you're writing with Channing Tatum. Like where you were there, when's it coming out, any sort of teasers.
Yes. He's my boyfriend, Chan. Got his own number in my phone. Yeah, I'm writing a romance novel with Channing Tatum. And every time I say it, I'm like, he's just so hot. And it's just like a big, he's so nice. I meet a fair amount of celebrities and, some people, it's like, don't meet them. Just let them be who they are and let the fantasy work for you. But he is the real deal. He came to me many years ago now, it's been a while, and was like, hey, let's do something together. And I have this project set up at Audible, and I think you'd be a great partner. And I was like, yeah, I sure would. And so we started brainstorming, and so we're writing a romance novel about, how you make that pact with someone, like if we're still single at 40. So this couple actually goes through with the marriage, and they have to fall in love after. And it's fun and it's sexy. I needed a fun project because so much of what I do is horribly depressing. And I'm actually not a depressing, I'm a depressive, but I'm not a depressing person. And so it's going to come out Valentine's Week 2025. And will you come and do a joint tour? Literally. It's gonna be an audiobook, and we are acting the part. It doesn't even feel real. Like, when I say it, I'm just like, and then a year after that, we actually have very good lawyers, and so we retain print rights, and so a year after that, it will be a book that you can hold in your hand. Because audiobooks aren't for everyone, myself included. I don't like to listen to people. I don't like to listen to people talking to me. Not conversation-wise, but lecture-wise. And I don't know if we're going to do a book tour, but I sure hope so. And I will say this. I never expected equal pay because I know where I am in the universe. And he insisted without telling me equal pay. And I don't believe in congratulating white men for the bare minimum. The bar is in hell right now. So it just was so shocking to me. And I was just like, really? Well, thank you. My house that I just bought, thanks you. And actually, that's why I was able to buy a house. And so it's awesome. And I really can't wait for it to come out. I'm actually doing most of the writing. So, you know, like when you're in high school and you're chasing after that boy, and you're the nerdy girl, and he's like, will you help me with my homework? Yeah. But we outlined the whole thing together, and I must say he's right there. Like, he shows up for our meetings. He is like 50%, like just really participating fully. It really surprised me because I expected him to just like put his name on it, but no, he's actually been in it. Credit where credit's due, and I really hope that people like it. This young woman has been waiting a very long time.
Yes, we have time for two more.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your wonderful questions and for your wonderful stories. As someone with a public platform that gives their opinions, how do you deal with the push and pull between the hope and definitely the expectation for moral, political, social consistency, and between the necessity to learn, to grow, to change your opinion, and put it out there still?
Yeah, that's a great question. You guys are really bringing the questions today. Thank you. We're all works in progress. And I actually try to foreground that in a lot of my writing, that I don't proclaim to have all the answers, but this is where I am today. And when I look back, one of the main questions I've been asked about this book is, has my opinion changed on anything? And the answer is no. I believe what I believe, but it's not that simple. The reality is that most of the issues I'm writing about, like, yes, women are people and deserve bodily autonomy. Black Lives Matter. Like, no, my opinions on these like fundamental issues aren't going to change. But what has happened, especially I think over the past 10 years, is that through reading, through learning, through just paying attention, I would like to believe I've gotten more progressive. I'm from Nebraska, I'm a Libra, so I've been accused of being a centrist, and that's fair. But I come by it naturally. But where 10 years ago I would have said we need to reform the police, now I recognize you cannot reform something that corrupts. And that we do need to abolish the police. I don't know what should take its place. There are plenty of ideas already out there, though. There are amazing people doing work in abolition, both for prison and the police. And so that's how I've changed. And I like to acknowledge that, like, you know, you have to learn. I'm from the suburbs, so of course I would sort of buy into the narrative that the cops are good. And we are actually inundated with propaganda on television. I've been really paying attention to it for the past couple of years because we love to watch procedurals. And thankfully, I have media literacy, so I know what I'm consuming. But Dick Wolf, in particular, I don't know what a cop did for him at some point, but I have never met a man with more of a hard-on for law enforcement in my life. And when these are the messages we're constantly being inundated with, yeah, you buy into the narrative that most cops are good and there are just a few bad eggs. And it's like, no, actually they're mostly bad. And then like there's one decent one somewhere. I haven't met her, but she might be there. So yeah, I just have evolved. And I think it's okay to just be honest about that. And when I look at these essays, I stand by every single thing I wrote because I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time. And are there flaws? 1000%. I would hope that there are flaws because otherwise we're suggesting that we're perfect and I'm not. So I've just evolved and it's been great. And thank you. Who's our last friend? All right, I see you. I might have to do the last person.
Can you hear me from the back?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Gay. You just mentioned that you might quit with teaching. So I have a question. When would you release your baking book?
I mean, thank you for the important question. Nothing will make you work on a book that you have no need to write than deadlines for a book that's 8 years past due. I know, it's so bad. I wrote over the pandemic a proposal for a cookbook. And yes, I haven't sold it yet. I haven't given it to my agent, but it's called IBGAF, Cooking for the Rest of Us. And it's a cookbook for people like me who are not going to separate the wet and dry ingredients. You know, like in a recipe where they're like, take a bowl and, you know, put your baking powder, your baking soda, your flour. No. I am not dirtying up an unnecessary bowl. I will tell you the truth. When you put the flour, the baking soda, the salt into the wet ingredients, which you do need to mix separately, all at once, it's fine. It totally is fine. The cake does not know the difference in any way, shape, or form. And so I wanted to write a cookbook with hopefully some decent recipes that were fun and that were written by someone who's like just a normal cook. I'm really good with a recipe, but I don't have like flair in the kitchen or imagination. But if you give me a recipe, I will make you a beautiful meal. And I enjoy it, and I enjoy playing around, and I have no problem showing like, "Ugh, that cake didn't turn out so good." So I hope at some point to write it. It will be a collection of essays and recipes, because cookbook authors, it's a real skill. It's a specialty, and so I want to be clear. Like I know that I should not be doing this. And I know that recipe development is a talent. It is a full-time job. But that said, here are some recipes from someone who does not have any of that skill set. And I don't know when that will come out, but my agent seems pretty confident that she can sell it. I'll buy it.
Okay, thank you. Milo, would it be okay to end with a beautiful compliment from the world and a teeny tiny question about magic? Kyle Miner, and I did not write down the newspaper that they were writing for, said, and this is such a beautiful paragraph. Haiti has long been the most interesting country in the Americas. Its better scribes among them, Edwidge Danticut, Frank Etienne, Madison Smartbell, Lionel Trouillot, and Marie Vieux Chenet have produced some of the best literature in the world. Here it is. Add to their ranks Roxanne Gay, a bright and shining star. And then goes on to talk about IAT, which is one of my favorite books of yours. IAT is an exciting new chapter in an old and beautiful story. You can choose either of these. I wanted to ask you what you think is a new chapter that you would write or a new character that you would put into IAT, or IAT for all of us to know about right now. Or you call yourself over and over a realist and a practical person, but you're also Haitian. So what, if any, is the role of magic and spirit in your life?
I'll go with the magic question. Well, listen, I think magic is infused in almost everything I do. And I'm not a woo person. I'm not, except for the fact that I'm a Libra and I am a quintuple Libra. I know, it's amazing. But at the same time, I am a Haitian American woman. I'm the daughter of immigrants who found their way to this country and then packed everything up from New York and went to Omaha, Nebraska in the cold. Didn't really speak the language, learned the language, navigated an extraordinarily racist and white community, and managed to raise 3 children who all became professionals. And 2 of them are CEOs, and 1 of them is me. And their siblings raised the current president of Harvard University, and a new faculty member who's now a dean at Northwestern. Like, my cousins and I are awesome. And I don't say that out of arrogance. I say that because that's magic to survive this country and the challenges that you face as Black people, as immigrants, as children of immigrants. Those challenges are overwhelming. And yet you still find ways to live, to thrive, to not let that shape the entirety of who you are. And there are so many of us in this room. We're everywhere. And that is the thing that keeps me feeling like, yes, magic is real. And there's oftentimes work behind magic. Like, when you really break down what magic is, it's a series of moves and it's really coordinated. And I think so are our lives and what we accomplish with those lives. So yeah, that's how I would say magic is in my life. And also, I have amazing, amazing parents. They're a mess, but they just love their children. Maybe a little too much at times, but like, we hang out with them all the time. We spent most of COVID with them because I was like, I'm not gonna go a year without seeing my parents. Well, my mom is sick, that's why. And that we have this amazing relationship. It's like magical because there was a time in my life where I never would have guessed that would be possible. I was just like, oh, they're terrible. I hate them. They hate me. Oh. And now, like, we get along, and so it's a gift. And I hope that everyone gets to have a gift like that of some kind, because I know not all of us are blessed to have good families. And by good, I mean people who treat you like a human being and love you. So magic.
Oh!
Thank you.
All right, for those who are taking house, it's been signed. Please